What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and most importantly, welcome to my first review for October. Every October, I have a ton of fun going back and covering a bunch of horror films I've yet to cover here on the channel, as well as some new ones, as well as just some Halloween adjacent things. And today we're going to be talking about the Addams Family spin-off that went to Netflix back in 2022, known as Wednesday. Directed by Tim Burton and several others, this show stars people like Jenna Ortega, Guzman, Zeta Jones, Christina Ricci, Gwendolyn Christie, and many, many more. So before we get too far into this, I think it's clear you guys are probably wondering, dude, this show came out in 2022, what have you been doing? I struggle a lot when it comes down to new streaming shows, unless it's part of an established franchise that I'm already into, and so it does break my heart because I am a big Addams Family fan, and I just never got around to this. I put it on the back burner. I was covering other things around that time in 2022, and so much time has gone by, and I had yet to cover it. So I just recently watched through the first season. Finally, I know that season 2 is going to be shooting sometime within the next couple of months or sometime next year in 2025, so I figured it was time to finally catch up, and what better time to talk about it than October. Of course, this isn't a horror film or a horror show, but the Addams Family is horror light for a lot of people. And before we get too far into this review, I want to talk a little bit about the Addams Family, because when I was a kid, I used to love the creepy and the eerie, especially the stuff that was for families. Things like the Addams Family, Courage the Cowardly Dog, or Scooby-Doo always really kind of got me into the creepy without me getting too scared. And it kind of opened the doorway for me to get into horror. And if you've been watching this channel for a long time, you know I'm an avid fan of horror. So when it comes down to the Addams Family, whether it be the TV show or the movies, I've always enjoyed the series. And it's a shame to me that I've took this long to get to this show. I just got to be honest with myself and just say I screwed up. I screwed up here. Really, I really did. So here we are talking about 2022's season 1 of Wednesday, a series that comes mainly from the director Tim Burton. He directed 6 of the episodes, and there are several other directors who directed other episodes. There are a number of writers on here, and right out of the gate, this very much feels like a Tim Burton project. While he's not the only mind behind this, and he didn't write the episodes, very much this feels like his tone, his vibe, and I've talked about it here on the channel many times before. I love Tim Burton. Of the films that I've covered that he's involved in, I'm always a huge fan of what he does. And even with certain films that I've yet to cover that I don't like all that much, there's still something about his films even that I don't like that I still have a lot of appreciation for. So let's get into my thoughts on this show. And first, let's just get into what this general show is all about. But I do want to say, similar to when I cover other shows that have been out for quite some time, I am going to be speaking fairly openly. So this review is far more for people who have seen this season and just kind of want to hear me ramble about it. If you have not seen the show, I'll start this off by saying that I think it's a great time. I think it's a very solid, straightforward spin-off show about Wednesday Addams. It changes things up. It feels distinct and unique within the world of the Addams Family, and it very much gives itself its own tone. It's got a fun murder mystery element to it, and I think that Jenna Ortega is fantastic in the lead role. With all that said, though, let's get into what this show is actually all about. At the very beginning of the show, of course, we were introduced to Jenna Ortega as Wednesday, and her brother Pugsley, played by Isaac Ordonez, is being bullied. She decides to follow where the bully is going. He ends up going to swim class or swim training. He's part of the swim team, and she pours a bunch of piranhas into the pool to try to kill him. This ends up getting her expelled, and then they end up taking her to a school for the misfits, essentially, known as Nevermore, where there's a bunch of other individuals who are misfits, as well as a bunch of people who have different abilities or are of different species, like werewolves and different things like that. It's a really cool school that allows it to kind of feel eerie and creepy and dark and very much Halloween adjacent, which is why we're covering it. And over the course of the show at Nevermore, she starts to uncover that there is some sort of monster in the woods that is killing kids, killing other civilians around the town, and she takes it upon herself to try to solve this murder mystery. We end up learning as the episodes go on that there is what is called a Hyde, similar to the Hyde in the Jekyll and Hyde storyline, where there is an individual who's turning into a monster without them knowing, supposedly, and she's gonna go out there and try to find out who it is. And the show does a good job of kind of keeping you on your toes, wondering who it is. I do think it was fairly generic in terms of a very obvious decision on who the monster was. I literally called it in like the first or second episode when I was watching with my wife. I was like, it's got to be that person, right? And we're going to talk about that in just a second. And she was like, yeah, it's got to be that person. And then it turned out to be that person. But the show tries to keep you like guessing throughout it. There's a couple of times that they try to make you think it's one character or make you think it's another character. And I think it does a good job, even if you did guess who it was, to at least kind of be like, oh, maybe I was wrong. And for the most part, what I really enjoyed about Wednesday is this world that we're in. I think Tim Burton just brought everything that I love about Tim Burton to this show. The performances were great, and that's obviously very much the performer's side of things, but you very much can see that Tim Burton, gave them that classic Tim Burton direction to make the performances feel here very similar to the things I love from his filmography. That tone that he's able to bring, this otherworldly, kind of weird, offbeat humor that's dark and silly at the same time, that's not too evil, but at the same time is able to kind of play that balance really well. And I think Jenna Ortega, as the lead actress here, does an incredible job as the character of Wednesday. And speaking about the character of Wednesday, Christina Ricci, who has played the character in the past, is one of the main characters here as the teacher, Miss Thornhill, who we do learn later on is actually part of the villains here. She is working with the Hyde and essentially commanding the Hyde, and there's more to her character. But it was so cool that they included her here in the show. I figured when we first saw her in the show that maybe she was going to be like a cameo for a little bit, maybe just a character you'd see from time to time. But I was actually rather surprised to see Christina Ricci was in so much of this show, and I think that it was just nice that they included her so heavily and really honored her time as the character of Wednesday, who I think in a lot of ways is the version that most people think of. But Jenna Ortega does such a great job of playing this character who is so nihilistic, so dark, and it just has the most offbeat, just off-color comments to make all the time about everything. Everything about her outlook is so bleak, but it lends itself to so many great moments of humor. And I think that Jenna Ortega is just showing herself to be an incredible actress as time goes on. And this show is no different, where she's able to capture this sense of irritability while also being such a wildly caring character. There are small moments in the nuance of her performance when it comes down to her eyes or her mouth just slightly moving in certain ways that give you this sense of care and love behind her eyes, even if she is fairly bleak and dark and uncaring and unloving in so many ways. She pushes those around her away, but at the same time, it's so clear that she's able to still capture this personality of this individual who wants to fit in, who wants to connect with people, even if she says and does the complete opposite. And I think that Jenna Ortega fully took on what the character of Wednesday Addams was when you look at all the other iterations and took it, made it her own, and just went off and had a great time with it. And it just was such a great time. It made me realize why I love the Addams family and why I love this world. And speaking of the Addams family, let's get into some of the other actors here who appear as some of these characters. Some of them took a little time to get used to. I already mentioned Pugsley, and I don't really think he has much to do here in the show, so honestly, I don't really think he's worth talking about all that much. And the same with the character of Lurch, who in this show is played by George Bercia. He's not really in the show much. He's just kind of present in a couple of shots, and it's not really like he's really an integral part here in any way, shape, or form. But the Addams family characters that we spend the most time with outside of Wednesday is, of course, her parents. You have Louis Guzman as Gomez, and I thought at first, strange choice. I've always seen the fan castings online for Oscar Isaac to play him in live action, which I do think would be fantastic, to be completely honest. But I do think Louis Guzman brought something to it. He played the very snarly, kind of very like still likable character, and I really thoroughly enjoyed him in the role as the episodes progressed on. At first, I wasn't sold on him, but as he appeared in later episodes, he was a good time. And then the one who really impressed me the most outside of Jenna Ortega was the character of Morticia, played by Catherine Zeta Jones, who I thought was fantastic in the role. She very much captured the essence. And when I heard she was first cast in it, I did scratch my head a little bit. And I am a fan of Catherine Zeta Jones. I've seen her in many things and have been impressed many times, but it didn't necessarily seem like the fit to me. And I think that's just one of those beautiful things of just trusting the process. As a viewer, I make it a point when I watch things, especially as somebody who critiques things online for fun and also as something I would love to make a career here. When I watch these things, I really try to just appreciate creative choices that maybe don't even make sense to me, but something that they saw behind the scenes that makes it work. And I think that this is a perfect example where Catherine Zeta-Jones for me didn't seem like the right choice when I heard about it, when in just like an online, announcement. but it really fit as I was watching the show, and I think she captured the tone that the character has in previous installments while very much making it her own. I think for the most part, the casting across the board for the Addams was a lot of fun, and I think that Wednesday Addams being played by Jenna Ortega was just perfect. I've really loved seeing her career in the last few years, and she's an actress I wasn't really familiar with in the early days when she was on Disney Channel, but between the Scream movies and, you know, Beetlejuice Now and things like this, and some of the other just random films I've seen her in, she's really impressing me, and I just find myself more and more endeared to her as an actress. You also have Fred Armisen in here as Uncle Fester, who at first felt very much like Fred Armisen doing Uncle Fester, but as his screen time went on, though it is fairly limited, I did really enjoy what he brought to the character. Fred Armisen is a comedian and comedic actor that I have enjoyed many times in various things. Of course, Saturday Night Live being one of the biggest places he's known for, and I thought he was great here. I do think he brings that charm of what makes him funny to the role, and there were some great lines given to him that made Uncle Fester a fun kind of mix in everything going on. And then, of course, outside of them, you have the character of Thing, who in this is played, in terms of his hand, by Victor Doro Bantu, who I think does a great job with the hand acting here. Thing was such a great and likable character throughout the course of the show, and there are so many great touching moments, surprisingly, between the character of Wednesday, Thing, and even some of the other supporting cast members that really got me engaged. And I gotta really say, I was impressed by all the hand acting that gave this, you know, a lot of these moments a lot more weight, and a lot of times some great moments of levity. There are some great laughs in here that are just small moments of dialogue between Wednesday and Thing. And Thing is not saying anything, of course. He's just doing motions and doing like sign language kind of things. And the way that this hand actor was able to bring these sequences to life, and the way that Jenna Ortega played off of them, really allowed you to just like feel engulfed in this world. And that kind of weird zaniness, again, is part of what I love about Addams Family, but it's perfect that Tim Burton was behind this show in a lot of ways, because he just knows how to capture an idea that just feels weird, you know, something that on paper could feel stupid to a lot of people. And of course, it's already been proven with the other Addams Family projects. But I think that Tim Burton's tone being brought to this very much added to the overall feel of these very wacky sequences, and a lot of them coming from these just random funny scenes between a character and Thing, and you being able to fully feel like you're engaged in the dialogue that's happening there. So now we've talked about the main family members, we talked about the general plot, but let's talk about some of the other characters here that are pretty integral. I'm not going to talk about all of them. We'll be here forever. There's a bunch of characters. There's 8 or 9 episodes in the season altogether, and you know, not everything is worth talking about fully here in this video, but I mentioned earlier before that I guessed immediately who the killer was, or who the monster was in the season, and that's the character of Tyler, played by Hunter Duhan, who builds up a romantic relationship with Jenna Ortega's Wednesday earlier in the show, and it, you know, it kind of still seems like a will they, won't they. There's kind of a love triangle thing that appears later on with the character of Xavier, played by Percy Hines White. And the character of Tyler, for me, was just immediately so obviously the monster. And the main reason for that is that he is the son of the sheriff of the town, who doesn't like any of the people at Nevermore. He doesn't like this school of misfits existing there. He thinks they have something to do with the murders that are happening in the woods. And you know, he doesn't know that right under his nose is his son. But he does know, we learn later on, that because his wife also had this monstrous ability inside of her, this hide thing, it seemed like he was kind of keeping it under wraps, hoping that it wasn't his son that was turning into this monster, only for him to eventually learn that it was his son. But it was pretty obvious to me when you have this guy who's trying to connect with the main character in the show. You have Tyler trying to connect with Wednesday. You have this sheriff who's the father who hates Nevermore. It seems so obvious to me. It's like, oh, okay, his son is going to end up being the monster, and he's going to kind of be put between a rock and a hard place where, like, he hates all these misfits, but his son is one of these misfits. And so it was so clear to me. I called it in the first couple of episodes. When they showed that it was him later on, there was no surprise in my face whatsoever. My wife and I looked at each other and were like, yeah, that's pretty much what I assumed was going to happen. But I enjoyed the will they, won't they kind of thing there in the romance. There were some nice touching moments, and it's a lot of those moments between the character of Tyler and Wednesday throughout the course of the season that very much lent into what I was talking about before, where I feel like Jenna Ortega was able to showcase this individual who is caring, who wants to fit in, who wants to be loved, who wants to be nurtured, while also being super independent and not wanting any of those things, and being super hard-headed and dark and bleak and lacking love and all that kind of stuff. She was able to capture these great moments with the character of Tyler, where she's still coming off super harsh and super just dark, but also having these small soft moments in her eyes and in her mouth where she's able to kind of showcase a little vulnerability. And I think that, if anything, I think the sequences between her and Tyler really are what made those kind of moments in Wednesday's character arc really work. And then throughout the course of the show, we meet a bunch of other schoolmates at Nevermore, most notably the character of Enid, played by Emma Myers, who is her roommate. Very colorful, vibrant, loud, excited, very preppy, super different from Jenna Ortega's character of Wednesday. And I think they do a great job of just kind of having the duality of the characters be so wildly different, and it adds to a charm that their relationship kind of builds up over time. And the character of Enid is a werewolf, but she hasn't wolfed out yet. So I thought that was an interesting part of the show as she eventually leads up to her wolfing out, and I just really enjoyed their camaraderie. At first, I thought Enid was a bit of an annoying character, and I think that we're meant to kind of feel that because you're supposed to kind of be seeing it through the lens of Wednesday, who's coming to this new school. She's not really too sure how she feels about everything, but eventually I found myself really enjoying the character of Enid, and I thought that their friendship that builds up slowly over time and some of the hardships they faced, while some of it did feel a little bit rushed at times, I ultimately found it to be fairly charming. Outside of them, you have other characters in the mix like Ajax, as well as Bianca, played by Joy Sunday, and Georgie Farmer. There's plenty of other random schoolmates that they make throughout the course of the show who are integral parts of the show. I already mentioned also the character of Xavier, played by Percy Hines White. But the other big notable name here that I was really excited to see in the show and I thought was incredible is the Principal Weems, played by Gwendolyn Christie, who I thought was great. I've always loved her. She's an incredible actress, and anytime I see her in anything, I'm always got a smile on my face. And I thought she was great here as well. She is the principal, and she also has history with Wednesday's mother, Morticia. She used to be friends, but also roommates with Morticia, but there's elements about the relationship that we learn about over the course of time where there is a little bit of resentment there, and I think they do a great job of having her be like this, figure who's above that you don't know if you can fully trust at times, but at times you also feel like you can trust, but then you don't know if she has it out for Wednesday, but then she's also trying to help Wednesday. And I thought that Gwendolyn Christie did a great job of balancing this character who is ultimately likable in the end. She does want what's best for everybody, including Wednesday, but she also struggles with the fact that she doesn't necessarily love Wednesday's mom. She has good memories with her, but also some horrible memories with her. And I thought that Gwendolyn Christie handled the nuance of that character really, really well. And then the last character that I almost forgot to talk about, that's a character I wasn't even sure I wanted to talk about, but he is a big part of the show. And I didn't really think I liked him at first. I thought, who cast this kid? I'm not really sure that he should be in the show. But it's the character of Eugene, played by Musa Mustafa. He's this kid who's part of the B Club off on his own. Wednesday ends up joining him at a certain point, building this rapport with him because he's kind of an outsider within this group of outsiders, and he's just kind of like off on his own. She kind of builds a rapport with him over time and kind of like uses him to kind of do different things in terms of this murder mystery over time. Eventually this leads to him end up getting hurt, and she builds this kind of like older sister, younger brother kind of relationship with him, with Pugsley not being around. And in the end, I actually really enjoyed the character of Eugene. There was this cheesy charm to his character, but I won't lie in saying that the first couple episodes that he was involved in, I wasn't loving his performance. It came off so goofy that I was like, genuinely, did somebody do this kid a favor? Like, is this the son of like somebody higher up in the, in the studio at Netflix that they were just like, hey, put my son in the show? I wasn't really feeling him, but as time went on, that goofy energy that he had, honestly, I found to be a really fun part of the show that made me laugh in moments that I didn't expect to. And so, it's a perfect example of just letting something breathe a little bit and seeing how you feel about it as time goes on. With all that said, those are the main characters I want to talk about. There's a slew of various other characters we meet over the course of the show, but we would be here all day talking about it. But I want to talk a little bit about the filmmaking, because I've already talked about the story and like the big reveal of who the monster is at the end and whether it was predictable or not. But I genuinely thought the show was so well made. I loved seeing all the practical effects that were brought in here, the costume design, the set designs, the locations used, everything about it very much felt very Tim Burton-esque, but also just was fun. And in a world where streaming shows, even on Netflix, can sometimes feel a little bit cheap, I think for the most part this show looks really solid. Now, an area where some people may struggle with this show, and I struggled a little bit, are with the monsters, because I mentioned we have the Hyde, the main monster here, but also when Enid wolfs out later on, there's a fight between her as a werewolf as well as against the Hyde, and the CGI here is fairly cartoony. I'm assuming it was more of a creative choice. At the end of the day, it definitely feels like it was meant to be kind of wacky and kooky and kind of lean into the Addams Family kind of tone and the very much of a Tim Burton's tone. So I did feel like the overall aesthetic of the show matched the CGI in a lot of ways, but it was also so cartoony at times that it was a little bit distracting, especially in a world where we have really good CGI. It felt like it was overly cartoony at times. I didn't hate it. I liked it and I appreciated it, and my mind was able to be like, okay, it fits the tone of this show, but it was fairly distracting in moments where it was just like so wildly cartoony how CGI heavy it looked, versus it kind of having a nice blend of still looking cartoony, but maybe a little bit more realism. Again, I think that was a creative choice, but it was something that I think is worth mentioning at least. And that's not to say I didn't like those monster sequences. The character designs or the monster designs are clearly meant to look exaggerated, which is why I do lean a little bit more into the perspective that it was intentional. But I did really enjoy a lot of the action and a lot of the monster moments, despite the CGI stuff. But outside of that, I thought the production was great. I thought the musical score throughout the course of the show was fantastic. I believe Danny Elfman did it, if I'm not mistaken. Loved the music throughout the entirety of it. Very much set the tone of everything that was going on. I love the opening theme of the show, and there was just so many great moments that the moments would ramp up and make me feel more excited to click to the next episode, simply because of that musical score, as well as the performances and all the other production value elements here. If I had to lead into whatever my biggest gripe for the show would be, I would say that there was maybe a few too many characters that they try to make feel important in moments that ultimately just never really amounted to much. Characters that you see episode after episode after episode that might have a line of dialogue here or a line of dialogue there that really never felt like they were ever fleshed out. And I feel like less characters in the mix, even though there are a lot of students around, I don't think we needed to focus on a lot of the random side students that I don't really think added much. There are characters like the ones I've mentioned, even the ones I didn't talk about a lot here, that I do think add a lot to the story. But I do think there's a slew of other side characters here, or just random students that appear episode after episode to have like one line of dialogue or one sequence or just be there to react, that I ultimately don't think we necessarily needed. Outside of that, it was predictable. Ultimately, this was a fairly predictable show, but it was fun, and I think that that's okay. I don't mind a show that can be predictable as long as I'm entertained, and I was entertained episode by episode. And I didn't really get into all of this, but the final episode, the one thing I would say I have a gripe with is there is a big showdown at the end with this, old pilgrim dude that appears near the end, Victor something, I believe. I'm not even sure off the top of my head. I should have written it down, but I completely forgot because it felt like such a random part. We hear about this guy from the past over the course of the show, and ultimately it just leads up to this big showdown between him and Wednesday at the end of the show that is kind of quickly breezed over. I mean, like that fight ends so fast and he just is gone. And it just felt like they needed like a big third act, killer guy to just appear. But I figured they should have just landed and focused a little bit more on the idea of focusing on the hide, because in the case of having this, other threat that just kind of randomly appears and is resurrected and is trying to kill Wednesday because of her old family member, Goody Adams, which it was nice to see those sequences between Wednesday and Goody Adams. I think that Jenna Ortega did a good job of playing those two characters. It just felt like throwing this other villain in the mix here just felt so just kind of random. And the final fight was so quick that it just felt pointless. So that would probably be my biggest gripe of the show. With all that said, though, I really enjoyed Wednesday. I look forward to season 2, and it's been a lot of fun talking about it here with you guys. So I look forward to hearing all of your various opinions. I know this is a long video, so if you took the time to watch and you got this far into the video, thank you so much. Definitely hit that like button if you guys enjoyed the video. Comment your thoughts down below on Wednesday. What are you looking forward to when it comes down to season 2? And with that, we end my first review for October 2024. I plan on talking about a lot of horror and Halloween adjacent content over the course of the month. Probably going to be wrapping up the Halloween franchise that I only have a few more installments to cover, and I will have covered all of them here on the channel, as well as some Disney Channel original movies we're going to be covering in the Halloween space, and some other fun little surprises that I'll have along the way, and some new releases that are going to be coming out over the course of October. A big thanks to you guys for watching. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.